Off last week with a great study in John chapter 12, and as I look at this portion of scripture, I'm so blessed because the lives really speak of the great transforming work of Jesus Christ, and they really reflected the lives of the love for Jesus Christ. These people in particular, Jesus always being the focal point as he is in the opening verses of the chapter 12, and rightly so, as he is the centerpiece of the gospel message. The whole entirety of the Bible points toward and focuses around Jesus Christ, guys. And as he should be first and foremost for the child of God, the things of Jesus Christ. Matthew 6:33 is a very familiar passage where Jesus' word tells us, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you." And it's like that friend or that acquaintance or that family member we all have. Oh yeah, when I was going to church, or I was thinking about going to church, things just seemed to fall into place. And a lot of times when we were going to church, or people were going to church and then they fell out of going to church, things seemed to come apart again. But in other words, when I was seeking God, things always seemed to work out. It always should be all to his glory. And we kind of think that it's not church. It's not because I was going to church that things were going right, but it was because I was seeking the Lord. I was seeking God. I was seeking Jesus, that things always seem to work out. Things seem to fall into place. And as we seek him, all these things shall be added unto you. And in other words, we fail to see that too often, that as we seek God, he's the one that puts everything together for us. But in these first few opening verses of John's gospel, we saw three who surrounded the Lord in worship. I gotta read this again to you guys. But Jesus, therefore, he came 6 days before the Passover, verse 1, came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there, and Martha was serving, but Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. Mary therefore took upon the very costly perfume of pure nard, and anointed his feet, the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Here again we note, guys, we always think that Martha's always so busy, she's always serving, but here again we find her in that familiar place of serving. We can think, oh yeah, no big deal. She was taking care of the domestic duties, taking care of the domestic chores. But here the root word of the word serving is a servant or a minister. A closer look tells us that it was one who administered, one who cared for, one who contributed to the support of others, one who waited on, and one who served other people. And all of a sudden, the love language of service that Martha excelled in seems to take on a more important note. As Martha served, she cared for the Lord. As she served, she was a contributor of his support. As she served, she waited upon him, administering to his needs, an all-important role. And all of a sudden, you think that serving is not such a big deal or a small deal. It is a big deal. It is a great ministry. It is an opportunity where we can not only minister to the Lord as we minister one to another. It becomes something that I believe really blesses the Lord and blesses those who are the recipients of that service. We saw Lazarus reclining at the table with him, along with others. And we might think of kicking back and enjoying. It's kind of like we did last week. We kind of sat around, we kind of ate. Some of us were kind of grazing around the table, moving around the table, just eating and going, as we would. But we might think, we can think of that in kicking back and enjoying, but we also might think of the Lord's table. Today we're going to come before the Lord's table. We're going to have communion. And that's a great thing, communion with him. It's the Greek word koinonia, or having all things in common. And as we sit down at the Lord's table, we have all things in common with him. And it's not like that Jesus is common, but we share all the things in our heart with him, all the things that we are so blessed about, all the things that we are so filled with joy about, all the things that we are bothered by. Maybe we're having a bit of a hard time, and we can come and just let our hair down and say, hey, Lord, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. We have all things in common. Oh Lord, I'm feeling this, I feel a little bit down, I feel a little bit hurt. Communion with Him, or having all things in common, is a way we share our lives with Him. And He's blessed because, again, we pick on Adam. It's like him in the garden, kind of hiding out from the Lord. And the Lord calling out to him, Adam, where are you, my son? Hey, come, I want to hang out with you. I want to spend time with you. And it's very simple that the Lord desires that we would hang out with Him, that we would spend time with Him, that we would have all things in common with Him. It speaks of fellowship that's enjoyed, and fellowship that's crucial, because, a lot of times we feel that if things are being heaped up upon us, and a lot of times I've told you guys before, sometimes just in faith, it just raised those things up to Him and said, Lord, as quick as these problems are being heaped up on me, these cares, these troubles of life, Lord, I need you to take them, because they're weighing me down, they're just squishing me. Lord, I need you to take them. And like we raise our hands in surrender, in worship, in praise, sometimes we raise our hands in faith and say, hey, Lord, you take the great burden, you take the great weight. Let me take your yoke, which is light, which is pleasant, but you take these burdens. You take the things that trouble me. Communion like that is having those things in common. It speaks of that fellowship and joy as we recognize our like-minded experiences with one another. As we have fellowship with one another. Lazarus was sitting around the table with other guys, and it's something like, hey, we recognize our like-minded experiences in the love of Jesus Christ. Sometimes, on Saturday mornings, the guys, we talk about the silliest things that might seem like, before we start praying. But, as we share a little bit about what's going on in our lives, it becomes a time that we share and we recognize experiences that we go through, and how the Lord is delivering us, how the Lord is working through those experiences. And we also share the interests of other Christians. And the thing that makes us and draws us together and makes us a family really is the love of Jesus Christ. It's nothing else. We could have other interests. Oh yeah, I like motorcycles, I like surfing, I like this or that. But really the greatest common denominator in anyone's life is the love of Jesus Christ. And because then we become not only, we work together, we ride motorcycles together, or this or that, we golf and all that, but it's the thing that, we hang out and get drunk, a lot of the world, the guys do that. But it's the interest of other Christians in the love of Jesus Christ that kind of makes us a family, brings us together. Most of all, it's the sweet fellowship we have with Him and in Him that makes us a family. Guys, so the little special times of that we have, like with the movie night coming up, we're going to have some time that we can just enjoy the popcorn or whatever we have, and enjoy the fellowship with one another. It's kind of like, like Lazarus sitting down with the table with Jesus in breaking bread. And it's kind of like, again, if you open up your heart to me, I will come in, I will have fellowship with you. And that fellowship in Christ is really, a lot of it is with one another, because the love of Jesus Christ is exhibited through one another. The love of Jesus Christ is exhibited as sometimes we chip off the rough edges. Sometimes we share that, hey, we're going through this tough time. Sometimes we share that, hey, I'm praying for you on that thing, because I know it's a stretch. I know it's this. I know it's that. So we're just praying, and just that knowledge that, hey, somebody's praying for me. That's a great thing, And but as we sit down, those little things come out, and we can encourage one another. We can build one another up. That's where you hear that word edify. It's to build one another up. Mary, we found, anointing the Lord with a very costly perfume, and like offering up to Him the sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving and worship and adoration. It's not only, as I tell you guys, and I tell the guys, that prayer is not only a time to come with a laundry list of, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Or I got that bill, or I got this hard thing going on, Lord. But it's a time we can really say, hey, Lord, thank you for all that you've already blessed us with and what you've done for us. And it's a time that we can give the sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving, and we can worship in adoration. And again, that word adoration, we worship and adore you, bowing down before you. songs of praise are singing, hallelujahs ringing. As we kind of think that, hey, hallelujah, praise the Lord. We are giving thanks beyond our own means. And here Mary was giving her thanks beyond her own means, also far beyond her means. This perfume was probably a year's salary for her, or even more. And she gave beyond her means. And when you can kind of think that she gave beyond her physical or financial means, but yet it can also mean that we give beyond our own physical means, our own spiritual means. And that's really when we see the Lord coming through. Isn't that right, guys? When we go beyond our own comfort zone, our own ability, our own ability to serve or to give or to do this or to do that, it's really like, hey, Lord, I'm depending on you to accomplish this. Lord, I'm depending on you because I can't do it in my own strength. I have little faith and I have little strength, and this is as far as I go because I can't do it. And that's when we say, Lord, I'm going to step out in faith and see what you do and what you can accomplish as I go in faith. And I want to just move and minister beyond my own means and see what you can accomplish as I'm willing to just go ahead and step out in faith. 3 love languages of worship, guys, in serving, in communion, and adoration. We see it with Martha, Lazarus, and Mary. 3 things here. Now we look at a fourth personality in the dynamic of this chapter. This chapter is interesting because you look at quite a different range of dynamics of people and the moving of the Holy Spirit, the moving in the love of Jesus Christ, and then the moving in the flesh, guys, and even the moving of probably the devil too, we'll see here. But the languages of worship, the fourth personality now in the dynamic of this chapter, we are introduced to one called Judas Iscariot. Let's read verses 4 and 6 of chapter 12. But Judas Iscariot was one of his disciples who was intending to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor people?" Like the other disciples, guys, Judas was one who was chosen at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. Jesus walked this earth as he began his ministry for some 3 years. He was chosen with the other disciples. He went out with the Lord, and for about these 3 years, he witnessed all his miracles. He heard all his teachings, and he was included on that inner circle. All the special teachings, all the instructions, all the little tidbits that Jesus reserved for these 12 men, he was included in all this insight that was accorded to the 12 guys. We see that Judas was entrusted as the keeper of the funds for this little group, but we see here that he stole from the treasury. Wow. What do you like that? He was one who was pilfering, and his care was not really for the poor people. His care was not for those who are physically and financially poor, those who are poor in spirit, but his real thing was that he stole from the treasury. And here's the thing that, as God entrusts us with certain duties and certain things, we can squander those things, or we can be as those good stewards of those. Here we see the exact opposite of what should have been done, that he intended to steal from the treasury. Jesus was one who would ultimately betray Jesus in exchange for a handful of silver coins. And this word betray is an interesting word. It not only means to turn against, to squeal upon, or whatever you might say, but to turn against. The word betray also speaks of a ripening. It speaks of a ripening. It's like a piece of fruit that over a course of time it begins to ripen. It begins to get a little bit soft. It's like a green mango. When the green mango first comes out and it's really hard, and it's kind of like the skin and the fruit of the meat. It's like one unit. It's kind of like, hey, you take that green mango, that hard green hated mango that we used to love when we were kids. You wash off the sap, and then you just bite it. You eat it like an apple. It was crunchy. It was hard. And it was sour and it was good. If you had a little bit of shoyu, salt, pepper, vinegar, whatever your choice was, it was even better. But that green mango was hard. But like that mango, you leave it on the tree or you leave it in your fruit bowl and on your table. Eventually, it would start beginning to turn some colors. A little bit of golden, a little bit of red, a little bit of color would come out, and pretty soon it would be half ripe. And then you leave it on a few more days, and pretty soon, hey, it's perfect. It's ripe, it's sweet, it's juicy. Man, it's ready to go in the refrigerator, and you slice that puppy up, and it's just juicy and sweet and delicious, and the juice is running down your mouth. You have to eat it over the sink because it's so juicy, when it gets to that ripe. But the word betray is like this ripening mango fruit, guys. It starts off as something real hard. It starts off as fruit, but as it begins to ripen, that thought of betrayal grows stronger and stronger and stronger. It's like we could betray our husband, we could betray our wife, we could betray our partner. But here's the greatest sin of all, that Judas was intending to betray Jesus Christ, the one who he hung out with, the one he spent time with, the one that he ministered alongside with, and Jesus ministered into his life. And like that ripening fruit, this thought of betrayal within the heart of Judas was beginning to grow stronger and stronger and riper and riper. James has a lot to say about that. If you like to follow along, I'm going to read out of James chapter 1. But James has a lot to say about this. James 1:13. James writes, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, for he himself does not tempt anyone." See, the temptation that Judas was going through was not from God. Because God cannot tempt anyone, and God cannot be tempted by evil. He does not tempt anyone, but when each one is tempted, when he is carried away and enticed by his own lusts. See, Judas, within his heart, within his makeup, and within each of our hearts, within each of our makeup, guys, we have the ability, or that flesh within us, that at times, we might be tempted. We might be lusting after something. It's like that guy on the commercial. He says, "Hey, I have that new putter. You guys don't even know about it." He got a new putter because he got some money back from his insurance company. But when he is tempted, he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. And when he is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And as you are approached by that lust, guys, and when it is conceived within your heart, it gives birth to sin. It becomes a sin. And here within the heart of Judas, he was already thinking, "Hey, I don't know, I can make some money off this deal. I can get some money if I just turn Jesus in. If I just agree to testify against him, I can make some fast money. I don't have to worry about pinching little pennies and nickels and dimes out of the treasury, out of the money bag. I can just go ahead and get this whole lump sum of money from these guys." It gives birth to sin, and when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Hey guys, the result of sin is the real result is death. It's separation from God. It's separation from Jesus Christ. It brings a deadening to our spirit. It brings a deadening to our heart. And you may have seen or experienced some people where their hearts become dead because it's deadened by sin. And we see a lot of people walking right on the street outside. Their hearts are indifferent to God. Their hearts are indifferent to the love of Jesus Christ. Their hearts are indifferent to the gospel message of God. They say, "Stop right there, stop right there. I don't want to hear it. I'll give, I'll do this, I'll do that. But don't preach to me about this Jesus." And as it brings a separation, as sin is accomplished, it brings a separation. He says, "Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good thing bestowed and every perfect gift is from above." See, all the good things, all the perfect gifts, or the complete gifts, comes from God, who gives so generously through his Son, Jesus Christ. It comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. See, God is a righteous God, guys, and He gives good gifts to His kids. And it's kind of like we looked at the father. He says, Jesus told these guys, He said, hey, how many of you are fathers? How many of you, your kids are asking you for a loaf of bread? Are you going to give them a snake? How many of you, if your children ask you for an egg, are you going to give them a stone? How many of you are going to ask for a piece of something to eat and you're going to give them something bad? The Father wants to give us good gifts. There's no variation or shifting shadow. In the exercise of His will, He brought forth by the word of truth that we might be, as it were, the first fruits among His creatures. Here's that word fruit again, guys. You can have that bad fruit, and that bad fruit was Judas seeking to betray the confidence and the trust of the Lord. And it's kind of like, hey, Jesus Christ, He's entrusted everything. He entrusted everything to Judas. All these things of the finances, all these things of the teachings of the inner circle. And Judas was ready to betray Him. And God's only desire was that He would be the first fruit, one of the first fruits among His creatures. In other words, the first coming in, the first gathering of the fruits of the harvest. Go back to John chapter 12, guys. Judas, again, was one who would ultimately betray Jesus in exchange for a handful of silver coins. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 27, we find Judas, how he was filled with remorse over what he had done, throwing the 30 pieces of silver into the temple, into the sanctuary of the temple. The chief priests and elders would not have anything to do with it. They said, hey, we're not taking back this money. That money is yours. It's blood money, man. We're not having anything to do with this money or with yourself. And what did Judas do? He threw the coins back into the temple sanctuary. He went out and he hung himself. And what a tragic thing it is, because as Judas took for granted his life and relationship with Jesus Christ, it was easy for him to look to the Lord as something not so special. Oh, God, He's not so special. But he looked with familiarity and with contempt rather than reverence and with awe. See, God is an awesome God, guys, and He desires that we would come with reverence and awe. And yet sometimes we say, oh, the man upstairs, he's good. Oh, yeah, God, thanks for this, thanks for that. But we give little consideration that He is the creator of the heavens and the earth. And we give little consideration. We look to Him with familiarity and contempt rather than with reverence and with awe. Do you think that Judas started out that way, or he kind of just came that way over the course of time? Sometimes the heart can grow a little bit dull. Sometimes the heart can grow a little bit filled with familiar things rather than the things of reverence and with awe. And how do we ensure ourselves that we stay in that place of honoring God? I think that we ought to never forget what God has done for us, what Jesus has done for us. I think that as we come before the table, the communion table of the Lord this morning, we become reminded of what God did for us, how He laid His life down for us, how He gave His all for us. And these are the things that we look towards, and these are the things that we become reminded as what He has done for us. Judas took for granted his life and relationship with Jesus. It became easy for him to look to the Lord as nothing so special and view Him with contempt rather than reverence and awe. He mistook the love and grace of Jesus and instead stole and pilfered and enriched himself even after being with the Lord all that time. Some guys can look at the things of Jesus Christ. Oh, it's a quick way to make a buck. It's a quick way to do this or to do that. And it's a money-making machine. We just get as many people in and churn, and we get all these donations and so on and so forth. But I'm just thinking that, hey, we gotta look with Him, look toward Him with that reverence and awe. When confronted with his sin, Judas, rather than repenting and seeking the Lord's forgiveness, he cut himself off by ending his own life. And what a tragic thing it is, guys. You know that before in the newspaper you'd always see, oh, a man committed suicide, oh, a man jumped off the tower, a guy hung himself down at the beach on the west side of the island, a kid did this. But now they don't even put suicides in the paper because suicides are so prevalent, guys. And you know, we have a high rate of suicide. I think Japan has a higher rate of suicide. Where in Japan, you know, people are committing suicide left and right because they have no hope. And you know, when you watch these Japanese programs, I hate to pick on these guys, but it is so enamored with their festivals and the carrying of these altars and shrines, and they're making these offerings to all these different gods, guys. They have many different gods except the true and the living God. And you know, these guys are a little bit more overt. They're very more open. Here we might be a little bit more subtle. We have gods. We have other gods other than Jesus Christ. We worship at those altars, but we kind of just do it undercover. We don't do it in the open, you know. When confronted by his sin, you know, he cut himself off by ending his own life, rather than looking for God's his own repenting and the Lord's forgiveness. He was not personally committed to him. He knew Jesus, he knew about him, but his heart was not committed to him. He becomes a warning for us to guard ourselves against our own sinful tendencies. Guys, you know, after walking with Jesus for 3 years, Judas kind of just grew cold, tired, and said, hey, I'm going to go for the gusto. I'm going to go for the glory. And like Billy Graham said, gold, girls, and glory. Judas went for the silver, the handful of silver coins. John 12:7. Jesus therefore said, let her alone in order that she might keep it for the day of my burial. Remember, Judas was going against Mary, indignant, saying that, hey, why was not this perfume sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor people? And Jesus said, let her alone in order that she might keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you will not always have me with you. In Revelation 12, we're told that Satan is the accuser of the brethren. He stands before the throne of God day and night, and he's accusing us before God the Father. He's saying that, oh man, Ram, hey God, this Ram is such a lousy guy. And then Les, oh, he's even worse. And then Leo, oh, she's bad news, man. They can't be your kid, Lord. These guys are bad guys. And Dougie, he's on top of that, man. And I know that, well, one pastor said that the sinometer, you know, it's like a clock. It kind of just goes, and, you know, certain people, that clock is moving kind of fast. And, you know, when they got to Hank, that sinometer was like the fan just blowing full speed ahead, high speed, you know, and that sin was going on. But he's the accuser of the brethren. He accuses them day and night before the Father, yet they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb. Guys, you know, sometimes do you feel accused? Does the enemy tell you, oh, you're so rotten, oh, you're so bad, you cannot be a child of God because, you know, you blew it, you did the ultimate thing, but yet they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb. And that's the only way we can do it. We can never do it by being good in our own merit. We can never say, oh, I'm so good, that's why God saved me and he gave me salvation. But it's a realization that, hey, Lord, I can never be good enough. There is no, not one who's good, no, not one. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And as we come and we say, hey, Lord, there's no way I can do it, Lord. It's only by you, it's only by your blood that I can overcome these accusations by the devil. Isn't it just like Jesus that he comes to those who are being accused or condemned by Satan? See, Judas was condemning Mary for anointing the Lord, and the Lord says, hey, leave her alone because she's doing this for my burial. He says, don't worry about the poor you're going to always have. And he was right, because, you know, we always have had the poor. The poor was always is still here. But, you know, rather than being accused and condemned by Judas, the Lord came to the aid and defense of those who are without defense. See, without Jesus Christ, we had no defense. Without Jesus, we had no way of saying, hey, we can be saved, we can be good enough. Before Jesus Christ came, we had to offer the bulls and the goats and bring sacrifices and try and be good, but realize, hey, we just can't be good enough. And here Mary, she had no argument or no defense against the accusation of Judas. And she was like a helpless little lamb, And yet Jesus, so quick to help, he was her defender. And he is our defender also, guys, because we are without defense. We cannot defend ourselves against the accusations of Satan or the accusations of the world. And a lot of times people might bring false accusations against yourself. You gotta let the Lord be your defender, and that he is exactly. Now the great multitude, verse 9, therefore of the Jews learned that he was there, and they came not only for Jesus' sake, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. Here's another group that we are introduced to, guys, the great multitude of people. And in Exodus 12, we're told of a mixed multitude of people who set off on the Exodus out of Egypt. There were those of mixed beliefs and thoughts and mindset, and I believe that this great multitude of people were much like the mixed multitude of people who came out of Egypt. They had a lot of different beliefs, a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different mindsets. But one thing they had in mind was they wanted to see the miracle of God as he raised Lazarus from the dead. See, Lazarus became like a circus sideshow. They want to see this guy who was dead and came back to life. And rather than saying, hey, glory to God who had raised this man from the dead, they said that, hey, yeah, Jesus, you're fine, but we got to see this man Lazarus. And some of the world, some were saying that, hey, we've seen it, and now we've come to see the Lord, guys. And I want to ask you this, that as people look at us, hopefully they see that, hey, we were dead in our trespasses and sin, and now they can look at us and say, hey, something really is different since this person became a Christian. Something is really different as they have come to that knowledge of Jesus Christ. And they might not say that or think that way, but they might just say, hey, since this person has been going to church, something good has happened. Something has taken place because they were really messed up. They really needed some help. And they go to church now, and they got better. So they try to figure that out in their minds, to sort that out. But as they look at that, they kind of put together a church and a better life for this person. And they got to just make that connection that it's Jesus Christ that has come into the life of that person and brought his saving grace and brought that change within them. This great multitude came mainly to see Lazarus. He had been quite a phenomenon, and he was raised from the dead, a bigger attraction than Jesus, the giver of life, guys. Here's this other group of people, the great multitude. And within this mixed multitude of people were those who believed, and were those who were just looking. Verses 10 and 11 tells us the chief priests took counsel that they might put Lazarus to death also. Here again, now another bunch of people. We see again the chief priests. Remember in the last chapter, chapter 11, the priests and the council came together and they were in agreement that we're going to put Jesus to death because he's too popular, because all the people are believing in him, because Rome is going to come down on us, because these guys are going to make Jesus the king of the Jews, the king of Israel. So they came in agreement. They said, we're going to put Jesus to death. Now we find the chief priests, they're taking counsel with one another, and now they came to the conclusion that not only Jesus has to die, but Lazarus has to die also. Within the heart of man is that ability to murder, guys. Within the heart of the beast is that ability, and I could just scream. There was a movie called McHale's Navy. The guy used to just tell his subordinate he should say, I could just scream, Carpenter. And he was like, his veins were bulging and his fists were clenched, and he could just say, I could just scream. And it's like I could just kill those guys, And literally within the heart of man is that ability that we can get so angry that we can say, hey, am I able to accomplish this? And the prisons are filled with guys who have beaten people up, or have even attempted murder, or have even accomplished that murder because they were filled with anger, and that rage within their flesh, they took off and they did it. And here within, these are the religious leaders of the land of Israel, guys, and they were making plans. We're not only going to kill Jesus, but we're going to kill Lazarus too. Can you imagine that? These were the religious leaders of the land. Here's another group of people in verse 11, guys. Because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and were believing in Jesus. What they didn't like, they were going away from the council of the elders, from the council of the priests, and they were believing in Jesus Christ. Can you imagine that? Here's another group of people. We saw Jesus, we saw Martha, Lazarus, and Mary. We saw Judas. We saw now the great multitude, the chief priests, and now the many who went away believing. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on within the hearts and lives of the people. And there's a lot going on within the hearts and lives of those in the world right around us, guys. I think that right around us we can see a little bit of each of these groups, each of these peoples, and the people we can come into contact with. And we continue to pray, we continue to minister, we continue to live our lives not as holier than thou or self-righteous, but those still in the constructions, those still saved by the grace of Jesus Christ. Guys might say, hey, I thought you was a Christian, and when you blow it, how do you react? And you want to bring out that sign, hey, I'm still in the construction. God is still working within me. I snap, I bite, I bark, but I'm saved by the grace of Jesus Christ. Amen, guys? Amen. We'll move on as we switch gears in verse 12 next week, and get away from all the personalities and look as Jesus is received into the city of Jerusalem. Father God, we do want to thank you this morning, Lord. We thank you